On this episode, Chuck Dawes has questions about a steel bars investment leading to a major plot twist. You ask merchanting questions and I'll answer them. Hi guys, this is Divine with episode 1 of the Ask Merchanting Questions show. I thought I'd give the series a name and see how far we can take it. I've been answering these questions for the past years anyways. Now that most guides are covered, we can really get into the day-to-day stuff to help you understand the markets and the thought processes in merchanting. Now real quick before I dive into the question, I'm not just going to leak people's investments ideas when they PM them to me straight away, or nobody is going to message me anymore. I'll wait an appropriate amount of time or ask you for permission to share the question if I feel like that's needed in this case. Now, I hope that you can trust that if I give you objective advice, I'll treat your questions with respect as well. I'm also not going to make a video about every single question, just a heads up there. If you have a question where you need more insights on a decision you have to make, then you can PM it to me on merch. I can't promise an answer straight away to everything, but I'll do my best. So let's have a look at the first question then, which is from Chuck Dawes. Him asking me that question actually inspired me to start this series now, so thanks for that. Chuck says, "Hi Divine, I read on your forum post that people PM you questions and I finally got around to watching some videos." Seems like Chuck is starting off on a high note. Now in the short-term investing video, you mentioned that you help guide people on why things are happening. I wanted to ask you about steel bars. They've been falling hard for weeks now and I've been investing in them, but I'm getting worried, so I wanted to pick your brain. Now instead of ending the message here like 99% of the people do, Chuck actually gives me a complete breakdown of all the things he considered. This is definitely one of the best PMs I've ever gotten, and if you structure it like this, you will 100% get a reply from me. Respect for you, my man. So let's start by looking at the graph of steel bars. That's a pretty clear decline indeed since the start of June. I'll come back to it later. Now Chuck first lists a few reasons why he thinks steel bars are a good investment, and then explains reasons why he thinks they may be dropping. Let's quickly go over them one by one. First, he says they're cheaper than the iron and coal needed to make them. For this argument, it's important to look at historic prices. If this has been the case for a long time, then this argument doesn't really matter. After a quick look at their graphs, we can indeed conclude that it used to be profitable to smelt these. The next argument is that cannonballs and steel titans are rising. If we look at their graphs, we can see that while in the short term cannonballs are up, in the long term they're actually down a lot. Steel titans on the other hand are really rising a lot recently. But there you have to consider who is actually making steel plate bodies. You might say, oh, free-to-play is doing that because it's really good money, but free-to-play is generally pretty dead. And if we look at the volume of steel bars, there's no way a significant amount of that is going to end up turning into steel plate bodies without the help of bots. And then Chuck says they're not on the wiki as drops from Menaphos activities. This was my first thought as well since the timing was very correlated, but Menaphos has nothing to do with smithing or steel bars. And finally, they're at a historically low price. Now if you've been watching my videos for a while, Chuck, you know that argument really doesn't mean anything to me. Then Chuck goes on to list the reasons that they may be dropping. First he says that adamantite stuff and smithing stuff is cheap because many people are at Menaphos reputation grinding, and because of the future smithing update. I feel like this is giving Menaphos way too much credit. I mean, people go there when a new update comes out, but it's not like the whole game spends all of their time there, so you always have to take that down a notch. And the smithing update is way too far out as well to make this kind of an impact, so that's really not what's happening. So there has to be something that our good friend Chuck is missing. Now I quickly looked into it, and instead of giving him a straight answer and just spoon feeding it to him, I tried to help him on his path to figuring it out himself. The first important thing to look at is whether the trade volume has changed. Since it's in the top 100 most traded items, we can do that. And indeed, the daily trade volume has gradually risen to about 30% more than it was a while back. That would obviously push down the price. Then the next question is, where's this extra volume coming from? So I see three options. Number one, an investor is offloading excess stock he's been holding for a long time, which seems really unlikely to me. Option two, people are smelting more steel bars, but why would they if, like you said, this costs money? Option 3, more bars are entering the game from drops, which is the most straightforward reason, so let's look into that. There are a whole lot of monsters that drop small amounts of steel bars, and looking into all of them would be a serious pain. So we want to focus on the most notable ones. Steel dragons can be ignored because their bar drops are noted. So then the next most interesting monster to me is gargoyles. These drop 8 of them commonly, which is a fair bit, and they're now likely killed more than before due to more people training Slayer. Now I actually told Chuck that it seemed unlikely this would make a big difference, but after checking on them, gargoyles are botted more than I initially thought. Next up, an interesting monster is Turoths, which drop 2 to 4 at a time. Turoths are historically massively botted, so it's possible that Turoth botters found a workaround against getting banned and are now flooding the market. Ways to check this is by going to the training spots at the Slayer Dungeon and Chaos Tunnels and hopping across many worlds to see if there are bots there. And I did this myself, and indeed I found gigantic amounts of bots. Additionally, you can check what other frequent drops Turoths have, and if those items have an increased trade volume and decreasing price as well. So if we look at the Turoth boots, for example, which is their unique drop, we see a massive price crash that is aligned with our steel bars. Around the start of June, the price started crashing more rapidly with shorter steps in the graph, indicating a higher trade volume. By far the easiest way to determine what's going on is by opening up the live graph, which tells the full story. Since the start of June, we see this super weird jigsaw pattern in steel bars. If we zoom in on that, we can actually see that every single day around the same time, the price crashes a bit. Now that's a flipping cycle if there ever was one. So what this means is, steel bars are being brought into the game by a massive gargoyle and Turoth botting operation. These bots are offloading their loot every day at around the same time. There may be additional reasons why steel bars are dropping, and it's rarely just one thing, but this is definitely the major factor to me. So for the investment, you then need to reconsider what is the new equilibrium that people will be willing to buy steel bars at large scale of course, and will that be enough for me to turn a profit that is worthwhile? Or am I willing to wait until Jagex bans these bots? I would personally not recommend waiting for that. Now you can think about the new equilibrium by calculating how much profit per hour people or bots would make by smithing steel plates or cannonballs, and how that compares to other money-making methods with similar requirements. People definitely wouldn't be buying them for the smithing experience because both methods are really slow. That's it for the first episode. I hope you learned something new. Thumbs up for Chuck for being okay with sharing this question. You keep asking questions and I'll answer them.